come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
Based on what you know, and I recognize we're dealing with so few facts, is it possible that just a plane crash could have collapsed these buildings, or would it have required the sort of prior positioning of other explosives in the building? What do you think?
No, my sense is that just one, the velocity of the plane and the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel hitting that building that burned, the velocity of the plane certainly had an impact on the structure itself. And then the fact that it burned and you had that intense heat probably weakened the structure as well. And I think it was simply the planes hitting the buildings and causing the collapse. My sense is that just one, the velocity of the plane and the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel hitting that building that burned, and you had that intense heat probably weakened the structure as well. As you can see, the impact on the rescue workers, I mean, these people who were heroes in this building that have been impacted by this, the number of people that have been injured, the number of police and fire officers, firefighters that have been injured is just, it's incalculable at this point.
Is it possible that just a plane crash could have collapsed these buildings, or would it have required the sort of prior positioning of other explosives in the building? What do you think?
No, my sense is that the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel that burned, the velocity of the plane certainly had an impact on the structure itself.
What perspective can you give us? I mean, there have been these repeated reports that, well, yes, Osama bin Laden, but some think he's been overemphasized as responsible for these kinds of events. I know many intelligence people at very high levels who say, listen, you can't have these kinds of attacks without having some state, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, somebody involved. Put that into perspective for us.
Well, I'm not sure I agree that this is necessarily state-sponsored. It, as I mentioned earlier, certainly has the fingerprints of somebody like bin Laden.
You served as the commissioner for Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management.
He is always poised to strike again. Immensely wealthy man and a very private man. He has been granted a safe haven by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban movement. And during his time in hiding, he has called for a holy war against the United States and specifically for the killing of Americans and Jews. He is reported to be able to rally anywhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 fighters for his terrorist cause. He is suspected of helping set up an Islamic training center, in fact several of them, to prepare soldiers to fight in all parts of the world, in particular against the United States. He is always poised to strike again. Immensely wealthy man. And during his time in hiding, he has called for a holy war against the United States and specifically for the killing of Americans and Jews. He is reported to be able to rally anywhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 fighters for his terrorist cause. He is suspected of helping set up an Islamic training center, in fact, several of them, to prepare soldiers to fight in all parts of the world, in particular against the United States. He is very elusive, moving from mud huts and tent cities and caves at least 3 times a week, taking other precautions. The U.S. Tried at one point in time with satellite surveillance to launch an attack on one of his camps, hoping he was there. It turned out he was not.
And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
That just one, the velocity of the plane and the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel hitting that building that burned, and you had that intense heat probably weakened the structure as well. And I think it was simply the planes hitting the buildings.
Poised to strike again. Immensely wealthy man and a very private man. He has been granted a safe haven by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban movement. And during his time in hiding, he has called for a holy war against the United States and specifically for the killing of Americans and Jews.
Those were some big clues, huh? All of a sudden, you were fed here's the man on the street. He figured out the collapse. And then we have experts tell you, well, it looks like the work of Osama bin Laden. The guy who was getting your CIA money. The bin Ladens and the Bushes vacation together, when in Saudi Arabia. And it gets even better. Who got to fly out of the country on September 12th, September 13th, September 14th? Well, the bin Ladens. But you were led to believe, because of this weaving, this fabric of lies, now we can keep pushing it. And I think it was either Goebbels or Hitler who said, if you tell a big lie, a big enough one, and you go over and over and over, the people will blindly. Now, we have people that do forensic research. Did they do that for 9/11? No, they said we picked up a passport on the ground. The FBI found a passport, and that's how we know it was those hijackers. Okay, so anyway, remember what happens now when anybody challenges the 9/11 story. Watch how they demonize them. Here's your newest president, former from the CIA and all the good stuff, Barry Soetoro. Let's see what he says.
I'm aware that there's still some who would question or even justify the offense of 9/11. But let us be clear. Al-Qaeda killed nearly 3,000 people on that day. The victims were innocent men, women, and children from America and many other nations who had done nothing to harm anybody. And yet Al-Qaeda chose to ruthlessly murder these people, claimed credit for the attack, and even now states their determination to kill on a massive scale. They have affiliates in many countries and are trying to expand their reach. These are not opinions to be debated. These are facts to be dealt with. These are not opinions to be debated. These are facts to be dealt with.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
That was interesting. Now I want you to remember why you were attacked. Remember, they sold you this, they weaved this fabric of lies to get you all emotional because you've been attacked. Notice this is Bush giving a speech, and he tells you, Well, why were we attacked? We were attacked because of our freedoms. Well, does Al-Qaeda make you stand like this at the airport and grope your daughter's genitals? Was that Osama at the airport, or was that the TSA, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security? Now, remember what else he told us. You've got to, freedom depends on you. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Yeah, who sold you all this terrorism?
Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other. These terrorists kill not merely to end lives, but to disrupt and end a way of life. Great harm has been done to us. We have suffered great loss. And in our grief and anger, we have found our mission and our moment. Freedom and fear are at war. Freedom and fear, justice and cruelty have always been at war. And we know that God is not neutral between them.
And once again, your chances of dying from a peanut allergy are greater. Your chances of dying from lightning strikes are greater. Your chances of dying from hitting a deer while driving are greater than terrorism. Who's selling you this terror? Who's selling you this terrorism? And who's it benefiting? So for homework, I want you to give you some homework. Tonight's homework, Operation Northwoods. I want you to look that up. What did the government study, fund, and do all this stuff to come up with Operation Northwoods? Then while you're at it, you can look at Operation Ajax. That's declassified, where the CIA was, blowing people up. But, hey, terror is something who uses, how do they use it, and why. And remember, you were attacked for your freedoms. Now that you have time to look back at 9/11, once again, how was that clown, that man on the street who all of a sudden figured out all the calculations, yet there wasn't a speck of dust on him? Was he even in New York? Yeah, but he was the super genius. So with that, I know it's hard for anyone to question, or even think or follow money or figure out who benefited or, follow the money in the transactions and all the things. But as you look back at it now, and you're older and you're wiser, and you got lied into one war. Oh, yeah. After 1 million dead Iraqis, do I have to ask the viewers of this town, Sharon, is 1 million dead Iraqis a Holocaust? Or do I have to get to 2 million dead Iraqis? How many Afghanis, how many Pakistan weddings do we have to blow up by remote-controlled vehicles before we can call them a terrorist too? Once again, remote-controlled vehicles blowing up weddings. That's not a bomb strapped to you, is it? No, that's what, cleaner? So now you're cleaner, and I'll ask you, after 1 million Iraqis, is it a Holocaust, viewers? When you found out the weapons of mass destruction, the only ones he had were the ones that Donald Rumsfeld sold him? That's the same Anyway, I don't want to get too windy. I will say this. Maybe it's time for you to consider that criminal forces have taken over certain parts of our government, and that we as citizens, it's up to us. You got to look in the mirror. You're the one who's going to be the change. It's up to us to save the republic, to fight, and to value freedom. Why? For our descendants, for your children, and for your children's children. Let me ask you, is there anything more precious than freedom for those children? And with that, I'll say, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless this constitutional republic. Down with these New World Order globalist banksters who benefit from wars. And thank you for watching.